All right, welcome back to session 2. We have our geometry in here. We have a decent understanding of manipulating it. I'm going to go over here to the model browser on the left-hand side and introduce you to this. So if you do bring in a large assembly, that's not uncommon. In fact, HyperWorks is very good with large assemblies, unlike other preprocessors. There will be kind of a list of different components, parts, options here. Anything that's within your model, right? And all of the geometry is going to be listed here as well. This isn't super helpful, but it's listed here. So there's a very good chance that your model will come in with different components. Okay? Or if it doesn't come in with different components, you might want to make different components. Okay? And in this case, I want to make a few different components. So what I actually want to do is I want to take the front half of my airplane, well, maybe not the front half, just this front nose cockpit section. And I want it to be its own part, right? So with it being its own part, I can kind of toggle it on and off. I could show it, hide it. I can make it a different color. I can do all sorts of different things, but just for the sake of an example, let's go ahead and do that. So I would like all the surfaces, right, that make up the nose of this aircraft. I want them to be in a new component, right? So right now I only have a one component. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to right-click and create a new component, right? And so component and part are going to be, I'm going to use those pretty interchangeably, and for the sake of this presentation, they're going to be one and the same for the most part. So it's going to ask me for a name, so this is going to be my nose. Well, my plain nose. I can give it a color, I can do all sorts of different things. I'm going to hit close. And what I want to do is I want to put these four surfaces in there. I want to organize them, right? So if I right-click, I'll have the ability to organize these surfaces into their own little group, their own little component. Okay. So I'm just going to go right-click and organize. It's going to say, well, I'm going to take these four surfaces, and I'm going to put them into a destination component. I can either select from a list. Okay. So nose, plane, and I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit the play button. Okay. So what I see now graphically is that, this is a much darker blue because that component was much darker. Okay. I'm going to do this one or two more times just for the sake of show and tell. But this time I'm going to double click on my components over here on the left hand side. And what that does is this opens up a kind of separate tab for all of the different components that are going to be in your model. So I'm going to right click over here once again in this browser, create a new component. I'm going to call this wing left. Right click, create a wing, right click, create a wing right. Let's do a tail for the sake of argument. And let me start organizing these. Okay. So let's see, let me just go. Once again, change my selector to surfaces, hitting S on my keyboard. Grab all of those. The box does a pretty good job. Depending on what you want, I can now hold control. Maybe I want the belly part to be included. Let's just do that. Once again, right-click to organize. Right-click's going to have a lot of options in it for copy and paste. Almost very similar to what you would think of like in an Excel, right? So inserting a cell, those type of options, those quick operations that you just might want to do, copy, paste, show, high, isolate. I'll show those in a second. Organize. Technically, this is what the right wing, even though it's on the left-hand side right now. Let me go and select from a list. So this is going to be wing right. Hit OK. Move. Now I'm actually in this organization tool, so it's saying we'll pick some more surfaces. I can certainly pick some more surfaces. I'm going to use the little view cube down at the bottom to orient my model. You're going to see that this is quite a useful tool. Depending on where your model's at, you can click on kind of the nearest face or the nearest kind of isometric view for it. Okay. So I'll just click here. And once again, hold Control to get the belly part. So these 27 surfaces are now going to go into my left wing. Once again, I'll select from the list. And then I set a tail. I'm not going to be too picky with what the tail looks like, but once again, I might just click here, get a nice flat view. I'll call this my tail. That's fine. You're going to go into the tail. Okay. And then I'm just going to simply rename model to fuselage. Ja. Wonderful. Okay. I have a very nice, colorful airplane now. Very stealth. Okay. One of the reasons why I did this is if you are working on a much larger assembly, this does allow us to kind of turn components on and off, either using these icons on the left-hand side. I'm going to hit escape a bunch of times over here to get out of that organization tool. All right, so I can turn these on and off just by using these. I could also use the right-click operations here for hiding, showing, isolating, reversing, selecting adjacent. Okay, so there's all sorts of different selection options if you don't, if the square or the box selection is a little too willy-nilly for you, and you need, I just want, say, this surface, but then I just want the surfaces adjacent to it. So select, what is this? Adjacent. That'll just give me the next layer, right? So those next two surfaces on that cowling. So all of the selection methods are in here. Quite nice selection, and then display operations are in here as well. Okay, and like I said, copy and paste is also in here. In organization, those different types of things. So you can do a whole lot of just, even if I didn't have this model browser open, I could probably do a whole lot of what I just did in the big GUI window. I don't really have to use the browser, but I know how engineers like their lists. And so we'll give you lists. Thought I had to sneeze. All right. So that's kind of some show and hide, right? So once again, just change my component, my idle selection instead of all. I'm just going to change it to components and hit H on my keyboard to hide. Select something, hit H to hide. A is show, so show all. I can hit A on my keyboard to show all. Okay, perfect. So that's some selection. This is the model browser. As the model browser, as we start adding more and more things like mesh, maybe even materials and properties that we can do some for FEKO, that's going to start to populate with all sorts of different information for you. Okay. Before we end this session, the last one of the things I'd like to point out is that right now I've been working in kind of just a generic profile, right? So OptiStruct is our Nastran of Altair. But if you'd like, we do actually have a solver interface that is specific for FEKO. And although this really it doesn't change the look, it doesn't change the feel, it doesn't change anything that we've done. It just changes some of the tools that are available to you because, things like structural loads, displacements, boundary conditions, that might not mean a lot to FEKO users, right? So you're more interested in, electromagnetics and dielectrics and conduction and whatever, things that electronics do. So you can come and change this interface to FEKO, and I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to work in this FEKO interface from here on out, just because I think it does reduce some of the confusion, right? So there's a few less tools because they just don't really mean anything to FEKO, right? So FEKO doesn't know what to do with a pressure, nor should it know what to do with a pressure. Okay, so that's going to kind of end it for session 2. We talked a little bit about model organization. Once you have all these components, you can make assemblies and kind of drag and drop components into the assemblies, and parts does a very similar thing as well. The last couple things that I'd like to talk about, we have a really cool tool for matching. And what this will allow you to do, it will allow you to pick different parts. And what it will do is it'll search through your whole model, and it actually uses something called Shape AI. It's nothing more than a math algorithm. That's all that AI is, if we're being honest. It just sounds fancy and cool, which is 99% of what we try to do every day. But what it does is it goes and it recognizes parts. It reduces parts down to a single number. Right, and it can compare those numbers, and if those numbers are close, it says that those parts are similar. So if you do have a large assembly with a bunch of bolts and nuts and maybe small features, when you bring that in, they'll all be their own part. And you can do this to kind of organize parts together. It's pretty cool. Not super applicable for what we got going on here, but I do want to point that out that we do have a match tool. And you are going to start to see more, AI, as I use my air quotes, within our tools. Okay. Another thing that we do have are called features, and these features can be extremely useful, especially if you're wanting to defeature your part, right? So if you have been given a part by a designer that is fully featured, it's something that's probably going to be installed, but for the sake of your electromagnetic simulation, it's way too detailed, right? You don't need all the fillets. You don't need all the little tiny bolt holes. I don't need every rivet in my part. What this can do is this can go in and find those features, and then it allows you to do some bulk remove and bulk edit, apart from what we're going to do manually in the next session. Okay. So those are two tools within the assembly kind of workflow here that I just wanted to point out. And we are going to kind of work to the right on this whole, these ribbons as we go through them. And I will see you in session 3.